Hi, I'm Shawn Bland at the Art Center of Wilmington Island. We are so glad to offer a way to stay connected and continue creating art. Check our new list of art at home kits for both kids and adults, available for mail order and curbside pickup. Keep visiting our Facebook page and website to see the latest options. We will post them as quickly as we can make them. Each kit contains everything you need to complete a beautiful painting at home. Now that you have your supplies, it's time to watch a step-by-step tutorial. Today I'm using a 14 by 14 canvas, but it's also available in other square sizes that you can purchase when you order your kit. You can choose an 18 by 18, a 20 by 20, 24 by 24, 36 by 36, or 48 by 48. So you can pick your size and paint it any size you like. Today as we begin painting, I'll begin with the background space, and there's just a little bit of it, but it's important to go in and get that so that you know where the space is in between. So I'm going to start that with blue, and I'm going to add white to it. And so the blue and white come together and make this light blue color that I like. It will show up against the oyster shell and really make it stand out. So that's why I'm going to choose that one. So I'm going to do the brush. I'm just going to load blue and white, and then I'm going to come in and find a couple of spaces in here, and you'll see them identified on your canvas. But they show where there's an overlap, where the two come together. There's a space up here in like a triangle corner. And so literally with the brush, I'm just going in and filling up the space. It can be flat, it doesn't have to be too showy, but if you want to change the colors in there while you're painting and put just a little more white in some places and a little bit more blue in some places, you could certainly do that. And you can certainly overpaint over the lines that you see for your oyster shells, because we're going to paint them right on top of this space. So once you have those spaces put in, then we'll move right on in to the shell itself, because that's going to be all the background that we're going to actually have showing. While I'm painting, I'm just going to show you a few places that you can add extra, just so that you can see a little bit more peeking through. We've got a little corner here that you can make a little triangular shape out of. We've got a little space here that you can do. But that's just about all you need. Maybe if you want to come over here in this corner, you can add a little bit there. So as we begin to work on this design, we're going to think about going from the outside to the inside with our edges. We're going to start with a turquoise green. We're going to add a little bit of the blue to that. And remember, for the edges, what we want to be able to do is just set up the space so that we will know that the oyster shells are overlapping each other. And this is the one that's on the very top, so I'm identifying that one so that you can see those edges, and then we'll see what comes up underneath it. So this starts off, the turquoise color is really nice. I'm just using the toe of the brush really to go in and put the line in to put the edge so that you can identify each one of these separately. So when I go over to my palette to get color, sometimes I'm picking up turquoise and sometimes I'm picking up blue, and that will change the color so it's not always the same. I'm not trying to do it matchy-matchy. I want it to be different as I'm working throughout really this entire composition. So as I come, I'm letting the edges just come out right from the line drawing that you have on your canvas. So you can see I'm not necessarily just painting the line, but I'm creating an edge for the oyster, and that's the difference. When you have a pre-drawn canvas like this, if you will just let that be a reference point or a reference line for you to use, it's not something that you need to worry about drawing the line or painting the line. It's just a placement for you to feel like that you have an edge, and then you can build your oyster shell accordingly. In this area, I'm putting the width of my brush down and making the edges a little bit wider. And then as they go up, I'm letting the edges be smaller. And if you're painting on a large canvas, if you're doing something as big as like a 48 by 48, of course, it would take you 3 or 4 times longer to do it than what I did. And that's why this is on a video, of course. You can turn it off and on. And so when you get ready, you can move on to the next place. But the turquoise color is a really nice line for this. It's a nice edge, and it really gives it a good color that's going to help us throughout the whole painting. So I'm going to continue that. I'm going to even add a little bit of black to our blue to make it even darker. It's almost like a navy blue. So we can use that as we go too. See, that's a little bit darker than what the blue is. And I like that in some places. You won't need it everywhere, but in some places it is nice. So now I'm following the line that's going to make this oyster. And as you can see, as you know, oyster shells are not even. They're very rigid, and they're not straight. So because of that, they're uneven. I'm making sure that my brush is giving me that as I paint with it. I'm not doing a line that looks like it's even or straight at all. So I'm using my paintbrush to give me that look by using broken lines that I just push the brush into and let it create that edge. So that'll be important for creating the look that I think the oyster needs in this picture to give it the roughness that I think you'll like. So now I've gone all the way around, and as I said, this is a little bit darker because I added black, and this has a little bit more of the green in it. Now I think I'll do one that has a little bit more of the blue in it to make this edge even a little different than those two. So mixing a little bit more blue, I'm going to continue this edge. Now these two overlap and hit side by side, so you can see I just started this edge here against this oyster, so you can tell that this is a new one. And I'm just using short lines to make the end of that oyster. And of course that one runs off the page. So now I'm going to add turquoise again on my brush a little bit more and work with this line and this oyster up here. As you can see, these two meet together, so those two lines are common to both oysters. And then I'm moving on around the edge and going this direction and making this oyster shell have more of a little turquoise color in it than it does the black or the blue. And now I'm moving on over. We've got this oyster shell that is behind this one, but it does share a common line with these two. So once you do the big one, the other ones just sort of overlap or run into it. And so that's another good common quality for your painting for the lines. Pulling the elements together is a very good way to create repetition, and that's what's happening with your lines here. You're just repeating the lines continuously throughout the painting, so that element is easily almost just created for you when you build that edge together. So now we have another oyster coming up on this side, so I'm going to move on over this way and finish up this edge. It actually comes around this corner, and then you can see how many times I have to load my brush. That's important because you're only using the line of the brush basically to paint with, and so it doesn't have a lot of area to hold paint. So it's necessary that every time you make a line that you have to come back and load your paint again. So don't feel like, oh, I just can't ever get enough paint on my brush. You are getting all the brush will hold on that area. That's all it'll hold. So you have to keep reloading your brush over and over and over again. Okay, so now I'm going to add black to the brush, and I'm going to come around this oyster meets this oyster here. So we're going to have a meeting of the oysters in this one space. So I'm going to make one oyster, and then I'm going to have this oyster come on around and meet. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 oysters meeting in this one location right there. And the only thing I have showing is that little bit of blue that we did at the very beginning of class for our background. Now I'll pick up more turquoise on the brush, and then I'm going to come and we're going to get the oyster shell that's here. This oyster is on the bottom corner, and as you can see, it ends up meeting this one. So we have a line that's coming this way, and then you have an overlapping here. You can't see the edge on this one as much, it's not as dark, but this is where they do come together at that line. Okay, so basically when you look at it now, you can see the different placements of the oysters. You can see this one's on the top and these two touch, this one, and so forth. And so it gives you a way to get started and actually build the shells. So the next thing I'd like to do is go over and get a larger brush. So I'll wash this one out in the water cup and then dry it off and put it aside. So I can pick up the larger, wider brush so that I can begin putting in the colors. We'll basically continue from the outside to the inside. We'll basically do them individually, and then we can come back all together and finish it up as a whole. But individually, what you're going to see is as these begin to come around, we're going to use the brush in really the same kind of pattern and location as we can see the outside of the shell has. And to make that easy, if you think about taking and loading your brush with white paint and then coming in with another color on the inside and pretty much just following that first to help get you started. I want to do a gray color, so I'm actually going to use white, and then I'm going to put just a smidgen of black on it so it goes gray. But I'm also going to add just a smidgen of brown, just a tiny little bit, because I want this gray to be different than the next gray. And so what I want to do is change them as we paint, so each time it looks a little bit different. So the first combination of grays that I gave you was white, and then a smidgen of black and a smidgen of brown. And as soon as I went a couple of inches in getting that set up, I added a little bit of the blue to the brush, and you can see how quickly it changed. It even has turquoise in it because I picked that up as I was painting along because the edges are still wet. But what I want to do is I want to use the brush as a way to create the line of that next layer that the oyster shell has. I don't want to paint flat. I want to paint as if I were a sculptor and I'm just moving the clay. I'm just moving the edge. So I'm building it, but I'm doing it with color. So as I go around, I am using the rotation of my wrist to create looseness for the paint. As I layer on that brush stroke, as I lay it on, I'm making sure that it's loose and fluid. I want it to feel like it's organic. So if I let my brush flow that way, then the oyster will look like that. And so it's individually taking the colors and the brush strokes and letting them develop the oyster. You're building it as you go around the shell. I'm using a little bit wider stroke. Each time I go over to the canvas, I'm pulling a little bit more paint along the way so that it can change. So I picked up a little bit of the green, as you can see in this space. I'm adding some of the brown to it now, and I'm using the brush still in that circular rotation that's coming around the shell. I'm going around and building. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the turquoise as I come down in this area, and then I'm gonna continue the same colors throughout the whole shell. So sometimes I'm gonna put white in it, sometimes I'm gonna add turquoise, sometimes I'll use the gray. So I'm picking the black and white up in here and adding a little more, but I'm using it with a wide brush stroke, and I'm using the full width of the brush. And it depends on what size canvas you have, but if you have a small canvas, in just a couple of minutes you could fill up, your whole space. But if you had a bigger canvas, of course, it's gonna take you a little bit longer. I'm actually gonna take the blue and mix some green with it now and change that up a little bit, adding a little bit of brown, so I can have that in some of the edges too, because I think that's important to get the blues in. I like the brown. It gives it a look that feels natural, and that's always good, especially when you're doing something as organic as this and you don't have a specific edge. You're just creating those lines to make the oyster look full. So I'm adding more white now, and then I'm gonna add more black and white to make the grayish color. So I can add that in. And as you can see, I'm still just following the path of going around so that I get that look that's important for the creation of the shell. It needs to be layered. On the inside, of course, it has the different colors, but as artists, you have the opportunities to really change it and make it look just like what you want it to. And so, of course, that's what I'm doing on this. I'm gonna add just some white now. In some places, we want it to look like it's somewhat shiny. So if I take the white and go in, and as you notice, I'm just playing, I'm still following the same structure that it has, but I'm loosely painting in the lines. I'm just following the edging that you have on the oyster, and I'm just creating a buildup of paint so that it just grows right in place. And then I can finish off with brighter colors if I want, or I can leave it a little bit more on the natural looking side, a little more organic with browns. But in this sense, I think the aquas really give it a good look. I'm adding a little bit more of the green in it here. So I've got some green and turquoise. And then, as I said, I'm mixing the brown in with these colors sometimes to add a little bit more definition when I need it. The lines are wide at this point. They're not skinny on the inside like they are towards the outside. I do think the balance between the grays and the color is important because you've got so many of the oysters sitting right beside each other. You've got to somehow balance that so it works together as a team. So to finish this particular one up before I move to another one, I'm gonna go in with a pinky kind of color that's peachy. I'm mixing a little bit of white with an orangey red color. And that way, if I mix the orange together, you can see how peachy that looks against the edge. And once again, I'm going back to that drawing with an edge, creating a line as I go around the edge. And then I do that on the outside. And as I go toward the inside, then I lay it down and it's a little flatter, because I can use the whole width of the brush to make the width. And that works for that space. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more white as I come in here. And then we'll be ready to move on to another oyster. I'm gonna use, this is the blue. I wanna go in and put just a little bit of that, I think, to sort of finish that edge up. So the blue pops against that turquoise green, and that really works with that, I think. Okay, so with all the greens, a hint of blue coming in, and then we're set. So I'm ready to move to another one, and as they change positions and places, they're also, of course, gonna change the way we draw with the brush, with the way we move with the brush. I'm gonna go back and start with white again. I'm gonna add the black to it and make a grayish color. And this one's gonna be more on the gray side than it is a color. So it's black, a little white. I'm gonna use that first. Of course, I didn't wash my brush. I just wiped it off a little bit, so I'm still carrying the same blue and turquoise that I was using on this side. So to change up, it is easy to add just a new color to the existing colors you already have on your brush and get a good change, but also have a continuation of the colors that work really great together. So now I'll just add more white in the center. And once again, these are big strokes in the middle, and we keep them more of a line or an edge on the outside, and then we use just pure wide big strokes of color in the middle. So once I have that color laid in, then I'd like to go back and build the ridges that we need in here just a little bit. So I'm gonna use the turquoise again. I'm gonna add a little brown to it. The ones on the outside aren't gonna look as colorful as the this main one. These will be sort of smaller, of course. You'll see less of them, and the color won't be quite as bright. That'll give this one the center of interest place, and then these can just be sort of helpers to make the painting beautiful. Even though we've got one oyster, we just want to keep adding, of course, to this pile. So I added some turquoise on the outside, then I added a little bit of the green the way I did on this one. And now I'll add just a little bit of brown, and then just sort of give this a rest until I do some more building with the next one. So I'm just gonna wipe off a little bit of that color. And then I'm gonna come around this one. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna add the white, but I'm gonna go a little bit on the peachy side first. So I'm gonna add in that orange and reddish color, so I can have a little bit of pink. And then I've got this color that I'll start with along this middle area. But you can see how I'm mixing so much of the greens and blues that I already have in my brush, and that really helps. Look how beautiful the lines are that you're creating by just taking the paint that's already in your brush and creating those edges, because it picks up right where you left off with those colors. So don't, clean your brush, too much. You don't want,
When I ordered, my kits, and I got 2 blue herrings and I wanted a seagull. Can I get a seagull? No, I already got them from my car.
Okay, but you want to,
I wanna get a seagull too.
oh, yeah, you should too.
Yeah.
so as I'm using the wider brush stroke in this area, I still have a lot of the same colors that are on my brush. And I think one of the big problems that we have with color is that people are afraid, that they're gonna get mixed up. And you don't have to worry about that, because you can paint with a variety of colors and create such interest. You can make the color that you just can't buy in the tube. I'm picking up a little bit of the color now to sort of concentrate along the edges. Remember, because we're building a little more edgy stuff along the background. Picking up a little bit of the brown and the red even on this one, so I get a little bit of that color as I come right along the edge. So this is the red and the crimson, so we can just come right along in here to build that one up. But if you sort of squeegee your brush around, just move it around the edge, you can see how you can create what the oyster needs to look rigid on the edge. Adding a little bit more burnt sienna. And then going back now to the red and yellow to make the orangey color that I want this to have a little bit more of. So I'm gonna pull that in the center just a little bit, and then I can do a little blend with the big brush and just pull the color together. Now I wanna sort of finish up with a little more white in the middle. The white gives it that glossy look and the slick look like an oyster has. So you'll have to continually add the white to your palette, especially with all the colors that are on there. You can pick up a little bit of white and then just lay it in. And if you just lay it in without too much blending, it can just sit there. I'd like that to look a little more peachy, so I'm gonna add the yellow and the red to it. And now it goes peachy. There we go. That's what I was looking for. It needed a little bit more of the yellow. Now you've got that little peachy look, and that looks nice against these greens and blues. So, like that. Yeah, I like the working of that with the colors. Now I think against that one, I'll go more of a navy blue on the edge. So I'm gonna go back to the blue and add the black to it. And I can lay that in the corners just a little bit to give it the feeling of these being overlapped by the other ones that are close by. Now I want to add a little bit more white into this area. And then we will be able to move on to the next oyster. But I like the look of just taking the brush with the paint on it and just sort of blending it into what's already there. You get that look that it's an overlap with the paint and a blend, and it really works to make that oyster shell look like it is shiny, the way you would look at you know, a real one. So that works. My general plan here is to have this color a little more intense in this area, and then as I go back this way, I'm gonna have my colors lighter and not as intense. So I wanna keep this sort of my focal point in here and let that be a little brighter color. But I'm getting ready to start this one that's further back, and I'm gonna let that turn a little on the gray side, but maybe towards the purple side of gray. So I'm gonna add a little bit of the blue with the red, and of course that makes the purple look. And then I might just add a little bit of, once I get that purple made, then I can always add something else in there if I need to tone it down. So this is the look that I got when I mixed the, I loaded with white first, and then I added a little bit of crimson and a little bit of blue, and this is the color. And that works for me, but it's a little bright because I want this to be a little more subtle. So I'm gonna put just a little bit of the brown in it, and that will tone it down and give me the look that I'm looking for in here. So now that I have that, I'm just gonna go ahead, it's a small area, so I'm really gonna go around and just put a little bit of that towards the outside. After, I did this on the inside, and then I'm building around the edge. Since I want it a little flatter in the center, and I want it to have a little bit more of a line around the edge, I'm gonna just now take, once I have it filled in with that grayish purple color, now I'm gonna come in and do more of the, really the same color, but just a little bit darker, so I'm not adding quite as much of the white into it. So I'm gonna start off with red and blue, and once I have the purple shape, then I just won't add as much of the white to it. I want a little bit of that color that I can just put in. Remember, it's so important that you follow that shape of the oyster, and then you can just come right around the edge and make the layers that has. So I just used basically the toe of the brush instead of using the whole width of the brush. I just picked up some of the paint and turned the brush and just right on the corner put some of that in to give it the look of having those lines. Then it's real easy to have the big bold, wide spaces in the middle. Now, since I've added a little bit of that purple, we haven't used that yet, I want to come back in here and add just a little bit of that to the others. Oysters, and you don't have to add very much, but just enough to pull it together, and you can see that's exactly what happened there. I needed a little bit of that gray blue color here and in here, and that works. Now that's actually the color that I'm going to start out with in this next one. Here's a grayish blue color. I'm going to start in here, and remember using my brush almost like a wiggle, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and I'm beginning just to use it to make the edge. And then as I go to reload my brush, I'm gonna add brown to it this time, and then as I add the brown to it, you can see how that makes a new edge for me. So it changes the color and it gives edge. And now I can use the brush and just come on around and see how I'm twisting it and turning it. I'm creating the look of those layers that the shell has. So I'll come on around, and then I'll continue to build. So now I'm going to add white to my brush, and then I'm coming on throughout the center. I'm just using the width of my brush to lay it down and get a wider brush stroke of color. And remember, this is going to have a lot less detail than what this one has. So once I get those colors put in and pick up a little bit more paint just to give it full coverage. And remember, the larger your canvas is, the longer it's going to take you to do this, but it's going to be exactly the same thing. Your strokes are just going to be bigger or more of them. And I can absolutely see this on actually the larger canvas, the better. You can come in with your brush and really just lay down the colors. And just remember, as long as you're going and along the edge, you're just wiggling around and making the edges and then flattening out the brush in the middle. If you carry that technique all the way through, you'll be real happy with the results you get. Now, once I did that in the sort of grayish blue tones, Now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna add just a little bit of the turquoise, because we've got that carried throughout the picture. So that really looks finished to me. It has enough going on in there that I like it just the way it is. So now I'm gonna move on to the next one, and this one will be very similar, except instead of with the blue and white that I started off with, I'll start off with the turquoise green and white, and I'll sort of build that color in there first. I'm using the toe of the brush just to come in, and I'm doing it real sketchy, going around the edges so that it doesn't seem too straight. Make sure that it has some lines in there that just show how uneven the shell is. And each time I go to the palette, I'm really just picking up all the colors that I've already used throughout the whole painting. And that's the fun part about mixing your own colors and being able to tie everything together, because you don't wash your brush too much and you continue to have the same colors throughout your painting. So now I'm using the same white. I'm going back in the same place I had just mixed my other color. I added white, and I'm adding this blue, I'm adding cadmium green. So in this green now, I'm gonna come in here and lay on a little bit more green in this corner. And you can see how now all of a sudden, see how much that stands out against this other color. So the light green is important to do that in this area. So all of them look a little bit different, but they all have the same color. Now, once I do that, I'm going to continue to go back to the colors that I've already used. So now I'm picking up some of the gray, and I'm just, putting edge on these that's real uneven looking by using just the toe of the brush to blend those together just a little bit. I'm adding a little bit of that red into the shell color here to make that a little different, and then I'm just going to pick up the white and go in on the inside now to finish up with a little bit of the white. So we have another oyster that's laying down here. So in this one, I'm just gonna actually pick the color that I already have on my brush. It is a combination of the purple and the red. So I'm using that on the outside part of the shell. And if you don't have color left, it's real easy for you to make with what's on your palette. You're gonna start with white, you're gonna add a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. And once you get that look of purple, then you can add a little green to it. And that just sort of ties all of those colors together that we have in the canvas. So then I'll pick up more white and go in, and remember the wide brush strokes go in the center, so you can finish up that middle section with that. So as long as you still follow sort of the basic plan of going in and going around the edges, usually with the darker colors, you just sort of go around and flip that brush around, make it wiggly so that it picks up an edge. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to mix brown and green together and do that around the edge just a little bit more on that one. The brown really looks pretty good in there with the green, so I'll emphasize that just a little bit more. I'm going to do the same brown and green in here against this line, just using the toe of the brush to go in and give it some color and some lines and really build up the texture right along the edge. So we need a little bit more space in here where we need to finish up these oyster edges or lines. Okay, so now to finish up, we need to look at the lines and what we need to have to complete the canvas area in here. So what I want to do is I want to make these lines a little bit thicker. So the canvas is covered now, so I want to figure out where I need to accent lines, and then where I need to build up and accent more color. So I'd like to start with the lines first, and I'm gonna start with turquoise and blue. And if I mix both of those together, I feel like I can just come in and lay down that a little bit wider here and set up that space so that it really feels like it is laying right on top of those other oysters. And I like the blue and the depth that it has in the color. So I think that's strong and that works. I think I'll use a little bit of the medium green with brown in it to go to the next oyster and do the same thing. I think I'll come in and just lay in the edge, but this time it's with green and brown, and it's just giving it more of an edge. And then I'm gonna go in with the blue and the black and define this just a little bit along this edge. And I love the way that line looks, so I think that's thick enough for that one. And I think I'll just define this with a little bit more black right up underneath the shell itself. I think I'll do the same thing here with black, just go in and let those two oysters come together right in the center. And then I feel like we have all the edges that we need. We have the canvas covered that we need. So the dark works, the medium works. I'm gonna wash out the brush now, and I'm gonna add the white and then a little bit of the cream color. So I'm gonna use white with nothing mixed in at first, but I'm gonna think about the contour and think about where I need some of the white. I'm not gonna overdo it. I just want enough so I'm pulling out the roundness of each one of them. And that will take care of that part. And then now I want a little bit of the peach color, so I'm gonna mix in the pink and white. Make it sort of peachy with a little yellow in it. So an orangey red color with a lot of white mostly. And then I just want to come in and put a few strokes of that color to balance out the light that it needs. May hit all of them just a little, some less than others though. Because remember, these are just about disappearing in the background. You don't notice those quite as much. Okay, so I think if I build up this space just a little bit more, I like the edge coming in here, and I want this to be a little bit flatter with that turquoise color. So I've got a little white and peachy color on my brush, so I think I'm just gonna go in, add a little turquoise, get my brush in a way that I can just flatten this color out just a little bit. Then you can see how strong that makes that edge. Now I'll take the green and brown and really do about the same thing. I'm gonna add a little white into it so it's not too dark, and just pull those strong colors into that main area. And then I'll add a little bit more white to the palette, and I think we'll have the composition that we need. I think I'll gray that up. I'll put a little black in there with the white and the green. And I think that'll sort of take care of the gray and the green at the same time, really. You can see how just using the flat part of the brush to go in and build that area. Okay. So you're gonna find out as you paint something that's as colorful as this, that you can get really, really lost in playing with these colors. And it is such an exciting way to paint, pulling the colors through the canvas and creating the lines of the shell, mimicking those over and over again, and then having enough of the color that you have a good play. I think I'll go with a tad more purple. You get to a place where you just have to sort of go on your feel about what each section needs. And I really think that once we get that in, that that it'll be what the oysters need. Darken that just a little. Okay, so there you have an oyster painting done in a big wide brush. And once you get started, you can go a lot of different directions with it. So just to emphasize the importance of going around and making the strength around the edges help build it. And then going and using the flat of the brush, that you can just lay down the brush with the paint flat and just go in and really build up. The fun part of wiggling the brush, squiggling it, and making your own little brush strokes in there really add a lot of interest to your painting that only you can give it. So that's all your painting needs then, is for you just to look at it and play with colors that are important to you. If you've got a special color that you want to emphasize a little bit, of course you could do that. But if you're just painting to be painting, it's more fun than building a picture for a particular place just to put it though. Okay, well, thank you for painting with us today. When you finish your project, we want to see your masterpiece. So we'd like for you to send us a picture of your painting to our email at theartcenterofwilmingtonisland@gmail.com or post it on our Facebook page. Keep visiting our Facebook page and website to see the latest Art at Home kits. Thank you so much for supporting your neighborhood art studio.